Well, that was a very nice welcome. Thank you. My name's McMillan, and the message I have to share with you is from our book called Crucial Conversations. And the topic today we're going to be covering is what to do when you're angry, scared, or hurt. Or you could title it, or when you're really, really perturbed. What to do when you're angry, scared, or hurt, or really, really perturbed. That's our topic. And I really appreciate you being here. I have 10 children. Did you hear her mention that? And I'm married to this most beautiful wife. Bonnie, raise your hand. This is my wife, Bonnie. And one of my children, Ben. Raise your hand, Ben. They're here to support me. And we've had come on in, we've had quite an exciting time in our family when it comes to education. Now, Bonnie, you may want to correct me, but if I counted this right, we've had 2 kids who for a period of time have been homeschooled. We had 8 kids, who went to public school. We had 2 kids that went to American Heritage. And so we've had a lot of experiences with our kids and them getting an education. How many of you here go to American Heritage? Raise your hand. Looks like half of us. By raising your hands, how many of you are homeschooled? Looks like half of us. By raising your hand, how many go to public school? Looks like maybe a small fourth of us. How many of you have dropped out of school and are working for a living? By raising your hands. Okay, yeah. By raising hands, how many aren't going to raise your hand no matter what question I ask? Raise your hand. Okay, good. That helps me understand. All right. Well, with that in mind, we got work to do. We're going to look at a wife and her husband and their daughter. Now, I'm going to play you a video, and I want you to watch, and at the end of the video, I want you to answer a question. Here's the question. Why didn't Dad keep his promise? Why didn't Dad keep his promise? Okay, let's watch. Excuse me.
I agree. She has been playing around too much lately. But Rick, you're in no position to say anything. You've kept quiet for months on end, and now you've worked yourself into a frenzy. If you say anything now, it could do us more harm than good.
Why shouldn't I be angry? When I was her age, I earned good grades and held down a job.
And so did I. But here's the thing. I talked with her yesterday, calmly and respectfully, and you know what? I think she listened. I'm confident that she'll settle down. But if you talk to her, particularly while you're still angry, it could set us back.
Okay, my lips are sealed. But you better turn things around. That's all I have to say.
Dad, can I have $20? I need it for something important.
Oh, you do you? And why do you think you deserve money from me?
I don't know. Because I'm good looking?
Let's check your list of accomplishments. Your room is a pigsty. You talk on the phone for 6 hours a day. Your report card is a scandal. And you tease your little sister without mercy. Any other reasons why you deserve extra money?
If you're going to make a federal case out of me, I'll find another way to get the money.
Have you thought about a job? A lot of people get money by working for it.
Forget it. I got things to do.
Some people work and earn good grades.
Nice touch, honey. Good to know you can show a little restraint when it's called for.
How did Dad do? Now, Mom, she told Dad that I know we've had problems with our daughter, but she's doing better. Right? Is that what she said? But I'm afraid if you get mad at her, then things will get worse. So I don't want you to talk to her about the problems. And what did he say? promised to keep his lips sealed, his daughter comes out, asks really nice if she could have 20 bucks, and all of a sudden he didn't treat her very well, did he? You're absolutely right. Okay, what did Dad do that wasn't treating her very well? What did he do or say? Yes? He was using shame to discipline. Was he trying to shame her and make her feel bad? Yeah. What else do you think he did that was hurtful or not very respectful? Naming everything she's doing wrong and not mentioning anything she's doing right. Is that correct? How about his tone of voice? Was he mild and sweet, or was he kind of angry and stern? Angry and stern. What? Good. So, here's my question to you. Dad promised he would keep his lips sealed, and he didn't. He got angry at his daughter. Why didn't he keep his promise? Yes? He didn't have proper restraint. Ooh, well said. He didn't exert proper restraint. Now, have any of you noticed how hard it is to do what's right and what's kind when you're angry or mad or really, really perturbed? Have anyone noticed that? Well, I got a model to help you think about that, and I'm going to give you a few tools that'll help you to change your emotion when it's a hot, negative emotion and turn it into a different emotion so you can use that different emotion to do what's right. If I could teach you that trick, by raising hands, how many would like to learn it? By raising hands, how many wouldn't like to learn it? Again, how many aren't going to raise your hand no matter what question? Okay, there we go. Here we go. This is a model of human behavior, and I believe it describes about 80% of human behavior. It starts when we see or hear something. We see something, we hear something. It could be we're walking down the hall at church, and our friend comes walking, and we go, "Hi, Katie," and she just keeps looking straight ahead and keeps walking and doesn't even say anything or notices. That's what we see. Okay? The next step in the model, after we see something or become aware of something, we tell a story. It begins with a question. We say, why didn't Katie say hi to me? And then we answer our own question. Oh, I'll bet she's mad at me because of the party last night when I accidentally spilled something on her. I'll bet she's still furious at me. And that's why she's not answering or noticing me or responding to me. Stories we tell ourselves is meaning we add to what we see or hear. Meaning we make out of information that we get. And sometimes our stories are a judgment of someone. Ooh, they're bad. Sometimes our story is an assumption or a conclusion. Oh, I'll bet she's still mad at me for spilling on her last night. Sometimes our story is attributing motive to someone. We say, I saw what they did, and I'll bet they did it for this reason. So attributions, judgments, conclusions, those form our stories. So something happens, we go, what does that mean? Why did they do that? What's going on here? Then we tell ourselves a story to explain to ourselves what we just saw. Now, here's the important part of this model. When we tell ourselves a story, the story we tell ourselves creates our feelings, our emotions. Our stories create our emotions. Now, this is a real interesting idea. The story we tell ourselves about what's happening creates our feelings and emotions. And you'll notice that according to this model, our feelings and emotions tend to drive the way we act, tend to push what we do, what we say. Have any of you said something really unkind to someone you love? And someone said, "Why did you say that?" And you go, "Because I was so angry." You and I know that our emotions kind of make us do things. Our emotions push us towards certain behavior. And when we have those emotions, it's hard to exercise restraint and stop ourselves from doing what we really feel like saying, right? How many have had that feeling? A bad, negative, strong feeling, and you've said something that later you're sorry for, you wish you hadn't, but you realize when you get feeling that way, it's hard to exercise restraint, right? Well, that's the model. Now, let me give you 2 examples to make sure we understand the model. You come out of a theater late at night. You walk down the dark alley to get to your car parked in the back of the theater. Halfway down the dark alley, you see a large man leaning against the wall. What do you see? A large man leaning against the wall. You ask yourself, what's he doing here? You answer your question with a story. Oh, I'll bet theater management has provided a security guard to get me safely to my car. If that's the story you tell yourself, what feelings would you have? Safe. Sense of relief. And what would you do? Keep on walking down the alley, maybe even go, "Hiya," as you pass by, right? All right, let me tell you a different scenario. You're walking down the dark alley, you see a large man leaning against the wall. You go, "What's he doing here?" You answer your question with a story. "I think he intends me harm." If that's the story you tell yourself, what feelings does that create? Is that what you can say? Fear. Fear. Oh! What action would you do? Turn around, run the other way, right? Probably not continue down the alleyway going, "Hiya," as you pass by, right? Okay, here's my big question. What accounts for the difference in those 2 stories? The man in the alleyway? No, he's the same. What's different? The story you tell yourself is what's different. If you tell yourself, "I think it's a security guard," the feelings you have are feel safe and you keep walking. If you tell yourself, "I think they intend me harm," it creates fear and you run the other way. The difference between those 2 scenarios was our story. Our stories create our feelings, and our feelings tend to drive what we do and what we say. Make sense? Now, this is kind of an interesting model, but it has some powerful implications. I had a roommate that said this. I've heard these words from his mouth when I went to college with him. He said, "My mom makes me so mad." He said, "My teacher makes me so mad." Right? He said, "My roommate makes me so mad." Well, to the degree this model's true, his mom doesn't make him mad. It's the story he tells himself about his mom that makes him mad. It's the story he tells himself about his teacher or roommate that makes him mad. This model said other people don't make you mad. You make you mad by the stories you tell yourself. Could that be true? All right, let's take a look steps I forgot to show you. We see something, we become aware of it, we tell ourselves a story about it to explain it to ourselves. The stories create our emotion, and we act based on our emotion. Make sense? Okay, now, let's look at a husband and wife. I'm not going to tell you a lot about them, but as you hear them talk, I want you to figure out what story is the husband telling himself about her father. What story is he telling himself about her father? She just got a letter from her father. Watch based on how he feels and what he says, what story he must have about her father. And what emotion does he have because of that story? And how does he act? How do we see him act based on that emotion? Then something happens, and he changes his story. When he changes his story, how does that change his feelings? And how does that change his action? You ready? Okay. Watch closely.
We got a letter from my dad today.
You write it personally or just dictate it to a secretary?
It's in his own hand. And with Mom being gone now, I think he's becoming more nostalgic.
Well, what do you have to say?
Hardly anything. He sent a check, though. Pretty big one.
He sent a check. Now, he knows I don't like handouts. We don't need charity. Maybe I didn't go to some big Ivy League school,
He said maybe we could use it for lessons for the girls.
Well, the check is for our kids. Our kids. That is even worse.
You know, when Linda and I were young, we wanted to play the piano, but we couldn't afford it. I think maybe he's remembering what that was like.
Really? It was pretty nice of him, I guess. The girls would be excited. Going on for over a year about how they wanted to have ballet lessons.
What a nice thing, he said. Okay, Mom gets a letter from her dad, and she tells her husband, got a letter from my dad. How does he act? What does he say? Did he write it himself, or did he dictate it to his secretary? That's kind of a snotty statement. What do you think he's feeling? Kind of bad feelings toward his father-in-law, maybe? Maybe a prejudice. Now we get, in the next exchange, clues about that. He said, well, maybe I didn't go to no Ivy League college. Do you think her dad went to college? Do you think he did? How do you think he feels about that? Her dad looks down on me because I don't have a college education. And he's rich, and he's got all this money, and I don't, so he thinks I'm a nobody and no good. Is that the story he's telling himself? What emotion does that create? Anger. He's angry at her dad. He's frustrated, right? Then she says it has a check. He goes, for the kids. He goes, that's even worse. Because apparently her dad thinks I can't provide what our kids need. So he has to. Well, I resent him stepping in and taking over my job. You can just kind of see the story he has, can't you? And you feel kind of the meanness coming out. Then she says something. He gets new information that he didn't have before. She said, I think since Mom died, Dad's reflecting back on when we were young. And he didn't have money to give us lessons to go to piano lessons or ballet. And I think he feels bad and he wants to help our kids have lessons. Suddenly her husband says, you know, Dad isn't sending a check to rub in my face and make me feel bad. Why is he sending a check? To help my kids. He goes, wow, He wasn't trying to make me feel bad. He was trying to help my kids. What a nice thing. Uh-oh. His story just changed from Dad is a rich snob to Dad is a kind, nice person who's helping my kids. When that story changes, what feeling does Dad now have? Gratitude, thankfulness, even kindness towards Dad. And he smiles and he says, what a nice thing. Do you see how that model works? Do you see where the emotion came from, where the story comes from, how that affects what we do? Any questions about that model? Because it has some big implications for you if this is true. Any questions? Do you understand what we're talking about? All right, let's dive a little deeper. See, hear, become aware of, tell yourself a story. You draw conclusions, make judgments, have strong feelings, and act based on those feelings. That's the model, right? Okay, sorry. Now, what is the story this guy is telling? What's the story, and how does it affect his feelings?
He's a blood-sucking used car salesman, for crying out loud. He and his kind have been busting my chops ever since I started my own business. With anyone else, you are right. Stealing from them would be wrong. But cheating a used car salesman is not a crime. Cheating a used car salesman is just restoring things to their natural order.
What story does he tell himself about used car salesmen? They're dirty cheats. What emotion does that create toward used car salesmen? Very negative. Yeah, I'm angry at used car salesmen. Now, what does he do? We're not sure exactly, but apparently he cheated one. But he feels okay about that. Cheating someone who's nice wouldn't be good, but you can cheat a used car salesman if you want, because they're bad. Is that the story he's telling himself? Is that the feelings he has? You know, I was working at a factory. The name of the company was called Winchester. Does anyone know what they make? Guns, yeah. I was watching them make guns there. And they were asking me to help them say how could they work better together. So I was just kind of watching how they work. Well, there was this old guy. I knew he was old because he had gray hair. So that must be pretty old. And he was working on the line. And I talked to one of the workers. I said, who's he? And he said, he is the preacher man. And I said, preacher man? Why do they call him that? He says, because he lives in that old church. And on Sunday, people come to church and he preaches to them on Sunday. And then during the week, he works at Winchester. I thought, oh. And I noticed everyone liked the preacher man. And sometimes at lunch, people would go over and say, I got a problem. Could you help me with that? And he'd give them advice. So everyone liked the preacher man. Well, one day I was watching, and they were working on the guns, and the line that carries the guns from one worker to another stopped. The machine was broke. So everyone just kind of sat down, got out a newspaper, waiting for the line to start again. Well, I saw the preacher man leave the line. And he went over on the other side of the warehouse, and he went in the tool crib, and he took out a wrench and put it in his lunchbox. And a smaller wrench in his lunchbox, and a smaller wrench, and he took 5 wrenches and put them in his lunchbox. And then he walked around, set it down, the line started, and he worked the rest of the day. The next day I came up to him. I said, hey, can I talk to you for a minute? And he goes, yeah. I said, yesterday when the line went down, I noticed you went over to the tool crib. He just kind of looked at me. And I said, you got a wrench. You put it in your lunchbox. He goes, yep, I did. I said, did you take it home? He goes, yep, I did. I said, are you going to keep it? He goes, yep, I am. I said, isn't that stealing? Stealing from the company? He goes, oh, now you got to understand something here. He said, the last time we negotiated with management for more money, they said no, and they raised our help costs. He said, they stole from me. I'm just evening the score. Isn't that interesting? He's stealing from the company, but he feels okay about stealing. Why? They stole from him. They didn't give me the money I deserve. Did the company really steal from him? Or in a negotiation, did they just say, we're not going to pay as much as you want? He was stealing, but the story he told himself made him feel good about stealing. He's justifying himself. He's rationalizing what he did, isn't he? Isn't that clever, the way we can sometimes use stories? This is how good people do bad things and feel good about it, is we tell ourselves a story to rationalize or justify it. All right? Do you understand this model and how it works? Because we're going to have some fun with it. This guy cheats used car salesmen because he thinks they're bad and tells a story that said he's good if he cheats them, right? We call this story a villain story. Whenever you take someone else and you attribute bad motives, say they're bad people, they're evil and selfish, you're telling a story that turns them into a villain. Villain story is a story that says other people are bad and wrong. They do what they do because they actually take pleasure in it. They enjoy seeing me suffer. Now, don't raise your hand high on this. Just kind of raise your elbow so I can see it, but no one else. How many of you have told a villain story about your mother? Oh, she just likes making me miserable. That's why she's making me do this. Okay, just raise your elbow if that's true. Saw a few elbows and a cast go up, okay? All right? Whenever you tell a story that assumes someone else is evil and selfish, you're telling a villain story about them. You're turning them into a villain. Whoops. Now I want you to watch a video. A dad and mom comes home late from a date. Their responsible son of 14 years old has been babysitting. They're unhappy with him. Now I want you to watch what happens and use the model to explain it. Use the model to explain what just happened here. Okay, you ready?
What is this?
What were you thinking?
What do you mean?
You know what I mean. You were supposed to have your little brother in bed by no later than 8 o'clock. Here it is after 11 and you're up reading to him.
Yeah, but
Don't yeah, but me. You know darn well if he doesn't go down early, he'll be a handful tomorrow. You'll be off to school and your mother's stuck with a zombie all day. How could you be so thoughtless?
Are you through?
Excuse me?
I put him to bed at 8. Okay, you know, he got up a couple hours after that and he threw up. And I've been trying to soothe him ever since.
You don't say. Well, don't ever let that happen again.
Why were they angry at their son? He was up late reading the baby, and they wanted the baby to be in bed by 8 o'clock. Is that right? So, what they see is he's up late with the baby. What story do they tell themselves? What? You didn't obey us. That disrespects us. when you don't obey us, right? What feelings did that create in mom and dad? Anger, upset, right? And what did dad do? Got mad. Yes. He what? He lectured him. Okay? Could you tell he was angry? Tell by his facial expression he was mad? Could you tell that? Did the son stay up late because he's rebellious and disrespectful and doesn't care about their rules? Is that why he's up late? Did he put him to bed at 8? Yes. And the baby threw up and was sick, and he cleaned him, and he's trying to comfort the baby. Did he do the right thing or the wrong thing? He did the right thing, but Dad was judging him, wasn't he? When Dad hears the new information, yes, comment, question? When Dad hears the new information, he realizes, my story was wrong. My judgment was wrong. But he's too embarrassed and not very humble. He, instead of saying, oh, I misunderstood, I'm sorry, what does he say? Well, don't let that happen again. Now, you and I look at him and we say, oh, that dad is being so silly, so juvenile. But in the moment, he's still angry, and it's hard for him to do the right thing, isn't it? Do you understand this model and how it works? Have you seen a situation like that? How many of you have been that son in that video? How many of you have been the father in that video and got mad at someone and found out later you were wrong? Oh, I hate that, don't you? Okay. Now, let's watch a young girl. She promised her dad whenever she comes home from school, she'll do her homework, she'll practice the piano, and then she can play video games. Dad comes home a little early, and he sees her playing a video game instead of doing her homework or practicing the piano. Let's watch. How did that go? No, bad. Did Dad see her playing the video game? What story did he tell himself? She's not listening, she's not obeying. Does he feel angry? And what does he do? Shrugs and walks away. You know what we call that? In human communication, we call that going silent. Instead of talking to someone about your concerns, you just shut up, you pull back. Sometimes you give them the cold shoulder. Sometimes you give them the silent treatment. You won't even talk to them. It reminds me of the little girl in the playground that takes the ball and won't let anyone play. People go silent because they're angry or because they're fearful. Which do you think Dad was? He was angry and just gave her one of those looks and ignored her, right? That's called going silent in communication. Okay, let's try it again, and Dad will do something different this time. Tell me if you can tell me what behavior is this.
What is with you, Elise? You know you're not supposed to play this game. I have told you 100 times. You come home, you practice the piano, or you start your homework. But no, you go right to this game. What is wrong with you? Are you stupid, or are you just plain lazy, huh? Now go practice that piano before I really get mad. Let's go!
How did Dad do? How many thinks he handled that really well and ought to be proud and wish the whole ward was watching him? How many think he didn't do very well and really hurt her feelings? Yeah. Why did Dad do that? He saw her not doing what he thought she should, correct? Told a story, she's disobeying me and rebellious. What emotion did that create? He's angry, and what did he do? Yelled at her, and was very hurtful and unkind. Would you agree? We call that going violent in a crucial conversation. Sometimes anger pushes you to go violent and say mean, hurtful things. Sometimes strong anger pushes you silent, so you ignore someone, you refuse to talk to them. Or when they ask you questions, you give them one-word answers and don't say anything. Going silent doesn't build good relationships. Going violent doesn't build good relationships. When I saw him, it looked like a kid throwing a temper tantrum in a sandbox, right? Can adults throw temper tantrums? You know, if I took him aside and I said, "Why did you say that? That's horrible." You know what he'd say? "Oh, I wish I hadn't. I wish I could take it back. I was just so angry." You think? Well, our strong emotions of anger, frustration, upset are not good reasons to hurt other people. Let me show you what you do about that. I want to tell you a mostly true sad story. Mostly true because I changed some of the details just a little, but it's mostly true. I had a friend, and he and his wife said they were strict parents. They had some very strict rules in their house. If you obeyed the rules, things were fine. If you disobeyed the rules, there were punishments. One of their rules was you can't date till you're 16. That's a rule I happen to agree with. And when you date, you can't smoke, you can't drink, you can't take drugs. He says you can't kiss a lot, and more than one was a lot, and more than one before you dated 3 or 4 dates was a lot. So they had all these rules. And on weekends, you had to be home by midnight. That was the curfew. Well, he had a 15-year-old daughter that turned 16. She went to Dad and said, "Dad, a cute boy at school asked me out. Can I go on a date?" And Dad said, "I perceive this as a learning opportunity." And he sat her down and said, "Do you agree? You'll not smoke, you won't drink." And he went through all the rules with her and be home by midnight. She said, "Yes, sir." And he goes, "Then you can go out with the cute boy." She said, "Thanks, Dad." Friday, the cute boy shows up. Dad was the perfect gentleman. Invited him in, invited him to have a seat, called, said, "Your date is here." And then proceeded to give her date all the rules. And you're going to smoke and drink, and you have to have her home by midnight. "Do you agree to do this?" "Yes, sir, I do." He says, "Then you can date my daughter. Have a good time." And they went out. Well, that night, Dad and Mom were sitting on the couch by the front door. The clock hit 12, and there's no daughter. Not even a phone call. 12:10, no daughter. Not even a phone call. 12:32, no daughter. Not even a phone call. Dad was starting to pace back and forth in front of the front door. At 12:37, he heard a key slide in the door, turn. His daughter walks in, closes the door, turns around, and Dad was 6 inches from her nose. "You're late," he said. He takes a big whiff, smells something that smells like beer and burning alfalfa. He said, "You've been drinking. You're late. You've been drinking. You're grounded. You will not date for 6 months. Now get up to your room." She said, "But Dad." "Don't you but Dad me. Get up there." She started crying and ran upstairs. Well, Mom and Dad closed up the house, walked past her door. He could hear her in the bedroom crying. Next morning, Dad had cooled a little bit, sat down at breakfast with his daughter and said, "I want to know what happened last night." Well, Dad has a rule that says trust your children, but verify. That means check up and make sure they're telling you the truth. After 2 phone calls and a personal visit, he found out everything she said was true. She and a cute boy went to a movie, it was a lot of fun, went to have ice cream after, and he was funny and told jokes and was really nice. They were driving on their way home, and they drove past a friend's house, and there were cars parked all up and down the street. Some parked on the lawn. There was music blaring. He turns to her and said, party. He said, "Let's go inside." And she goes, "I gotta be home by midnight." He said, "I'll get you home by midnight." They parked, walked into the party, and she looked around and saw it was wall-to-wall kids with no sign of adult supervision anywhere. She realized every one of her dad's rules were being violated, and a couple Dad hadn't even thought of. She turned her day and said, "I want to go home." He said, "We'll just be here a little while. I'll get you home on time." She goes, "I don't feel comfortable. Please take me home." He said, "Find your own way." And he joined in the party. Well, she pulls out her phone, calls home, busy. Calls home, busy. Calls home, busy. Unbeknownst to Dad and Mom, their 13-year-old daughter, instead of being in bed sound asleep, was downstairs talking on the phone. Well, she couldn't get through to home, so she started calling some of her friends, see if they could give her a ride home. None of them answered. They were all out having fun. It was a Friday night. Finally, she called a friend that works at a restaurant. She said, "I'm stranded here. I need a ride home." He goes, "I get off at midnight. I'll come right over and get you. Where are you?" So she's waiting there for him to come. And the friends notice the kids at the party, she's not drinking. They said, "Hey, have a drink." She goes, "No, I don't drink." "Oh, come on, have a drink." "No, I don't drink." They spill it all over her. She gets up, walks out in the dark, sits on the curb, waiting for the ride to come. She gets in her friend's car. He goes straight home. And after doing everything her father would have wanted her to do, when she walks in the door, what greeting does she get? He yells at her and grounds her for 6 months. How many think that was right? Why did Dad do that? A misunderstanding. That's what began it all. A hasty assumption without information. We often call that jumping to conclusions or making false judgments. Good. He didn't seek out the entire story. He only had part of the story. And some of that was wrong, right? You know, as my friend told me this, I asked him some questions. I said, "When she wasn't home by curfew, what were you thinking?" He said, "I was thinking that she knows the rules. She can't make an excuse like I didn't know. She knows the rules. She was intentionally disobeying. She was being rebellious. She didn't respect me or my rules or my values." Okay, that's his story. What emotions does that story create? Anger, upset. And how does he act? He goes violent, right? And yells at her and grounds her. I said, when it was 12:27 and you were pacing, what were you doing? Or what were you thinking? He said, "I was thinking I am going to ground her for the rest of her life. She can't drive till she's 90, right?" And he said, "I could have spit fire." I said, "What was your wife doing?" He said, "She was sitting on the couch." said, "You were pacing, she was sitting on the couch. How was she feeling?" He paused. He said, "She was worried." Dad told himself a story that said, "My daughter's rebellious and doesn't respect me." Mom saw her daughter was late and hadn't called. What story did Mom tell herself? Something's wrong. Something's happened to my daughter. If you tell that story, what emotion does that create? Concern and worry, and it strengthens your love. You realize how much you love them when you feel that worry. When the daughter came through the door, Dad exploded and went violent, was angry with her. Mom said, "Oh Lord, thank goodness my daughter's home safe." Now, isn't that interesting? They both had the same information, but they told different stories, had different feelings, and that caused them to act in different ways. How important is your story to what you feel and what you do? You know what? Rather than feeling angry and trying to be a good, what's the word on self-regulator? Self-governance, that's the word I wanted. Instead of saying, "I've got to govern myself even though I'm angry," which is a good thing, could you come back and say, what story am I telling myself that's making me so angry? And could there be a different explanation of what's happening? When you tell a villain story about others, when you assume their motives are bad, that they're evil and selfish, you can turn them in your mind from a villain back into a human by questioning your story. You could ask yourself, why would a reasonable, rational, and decent person do this? Why would a reasonable, rational, decent person not say hi to me when I say hi in the hall? Why would a reasonable, rational, decent person be late? Now, if that's too wordy, just say this in your mind. Why would a decent person do that? Why would a good person act that way? Why would a good person say that? Now, let me tell you something really, really important is happening here. If someone says or does something that kind of hurts my feelings, rather than assuming they're villains and they just don't care, I can say, wait a minute. Why would a decent person say that or do that? Let's go back to Dad. His daughter's 10 minutes late and hasn't called. As far as he knows, she really did, but he didn't know the phone was busy, right? So she's 10 minutes late, she hasn't called. Dad said, "Ooh, she knew the rules, she's rebellious." And he starts getting angry. Right? And right then he goes, wait a minute, Dad. Hey, Dad, why are you getting angry? What story have you told yourself? And then he asks the question, why would a decent daughter of mine be late? Help Dad answer that question. Why might she be late? Could be she's rebellious. That's one possibility. What's another? Something could have happened. Like what? Maybe the car broke down and she's standing on the side of the road right now. What's another possibility? They ran into a semi-truck right on the freeway. Would that explain why she's late and hasn't called? What's another possibility? She got mugged, right? She's in that dark alley with that big guy. He's got her purse. What else could have happened? They were running late, so the guy who was speeding got pulled over, and now they're sitting there getting a ticket. Would that explain being late? Yeah, what's another possibility? They were kidnapped. Right now they're in Barbados with what's that on your mouth? A what? A gag on your mouth. Yeah, that's right. What's another possibility? What? Her date's a jerk. Would that explain her being late? Yeah, what's another possibility? She's going to die. She's in the hospital right now with a heart attack. It could be she's saving her friend's life who has a heart attack and taking them to the hospital. Can I add 3 more reasons? Maybe she got up on the wrong side of the bed, dropped her toast butter side down, and is just having a bad day. Could that explain it? Maybe her stars are out of alignment. Brothers and sisters, we just identified 12 possible explanations for her being late. Here's the big question. Why does Dad assume the worst one, that she's rebellious, when it could be any one of 12? Now, let me tell you the power in what I just taught you. When you find yourself telling a villain story about someone and getting angry, just pause. Say, I'm feeling what I'm feeling because of a story I'm telling myself. Then question your story, just like a scientist questions the experiment or questions the data. Question your own story. Say, wait a minute, Ron. I'm walking down the hall, I say hi, she just keeps walking, doesn't even talk to me. Okay? I assume she's mad about me spilling on her last night. Is that a possibility? Yeah. But why would a good person act that way? Maybe she didn't hear me. Maybe she's thinking about the test she's taken and didn't even see me. Maybe she's just having a real crummy day. Now, which of all of those is true? I don't know. So let me not assume the worst. I don't know. Let me not assume the worst. You know what we just did? We turned your story, that was a villain story about her, into a question mark story. What emotions does a villain story, a judgment create? Anger. What emotions does a question mark story create? Curiosity. Or like Mom, maybe concern. If you tell a judgment, you feel angry, how do you act? Usually with silence or violence. If you tell a question mark story and say, I'm not sure, and you're curious, how do you act? Open to a new story. In fact, you go to her and you talk and say, hey, I said hi in the hall and you didn't reply. What's going on? And now you talk about it instead of saying hurtful things or ignoring them. What do you think? Could you do that? Is that a possibility? If you were remote, where would you hide? There we go. What would have happened? Dad looks at the clock. It's 12:37. His daughter hasn't called. She's late. He goes, oh, I'm so mad. She's rebellious. She doesn't respect me. I'm going to ground her, right? But then he says, wait a minute. Why am I so angry? I tell him a story. Thank you. Why would a decent kid be late? Might be she's rebellious, but it could be this, or that. He starts to calm down. His emotion starts to go. Why? He changed his story. His story was a judgment. What's his new story? A question mark. I don't know why she's late. She opens the door, comes inside. He said, honey. He gives her a hug. He said, you were supposed to be home 37 minutes ago. What's going on? She goes, Dad, I have had the worst night. And they sit down and talk about it. Would that have been a different outcome than grounding her, sending her to a room, her crying, being so upset? You know, when he checked out her story and found out it was true, I said, how'd that affect your relationship? He said, I apologized. He said, but it took about 6 months before we felt close again. Is that doing damage to a relationship? Do you understand the skill I'm sharing? What's the skill? Check out your story. Now, the skill is question your story. Why would a decent person be late? Now, check out your story. Sit down with the girl who didn't say hi to you in the hall and say, hey, can I talk to you for a minute? State the facts. I was walking down the hall, I said hi to you, and you just kept going. Is that the facts? State the facts. Honey, we agreed you'd be home by midnight. It's now 12:37. Is that the facts? No judgments, no name calling, just state the facts. Then, share your story. I was starting to feel like you're rebellious and you don't care about our rules. Or to the girl in the hall, I was starting to feel like maybe we're not friends. Then, ask for their point of view. How do you see this? What happened? How are you feeling about this? And what do you do after you ask their point of view? Listen. Listen. Is that different than yelling? Listening's different than yelling. If dad's late picking you up from school, and it's raining, and the wind's blowing, and you're cold, you can get in and say, oh, I'm not even important enough in your life for you to be on time. Right? Or you say, Dad, you agreed to pick me up by 6. It's now 15 after. What happened? Dad said, oh, I am so sorry. And then you talk about it. That's different than yelling or pressing your nose against the window and refusing to talk to Dad, isn't it? Could you do that? Could you? All right.
Hi, sweetie.
Hey, what's up?
Well, remember last week we talked that when you come home from school, you either practice the piano or start your homework?
Mm-hmm.
That way you can get it done before you get caught up on other things. And we also specifically talked about no video games. Well, this is obviously not the piano, so what's going on?
Well, wasn't that just for regular school nights? We have tomorrow off. It's teachers' conference.
Oh, yeah? All right, now you're showing me how to play this thing. I push this?
Yeah, and then the guy jumps.
Is that a different outcome? Is that a different outcome? How many would like this relationship on the other side of a problem with someone? Okay, here's what you do. Watch for when you have strong negative feelings. Be aware of those feelings. Question your story. Why would a decent person act this way? Why would Dad be late picking me up? Why would she not say hi to me in the hall? Then, often the problem goes away. You feel differently and you say, you know, I think they're just having a bad day and I'm going to let that go. Or you say, it's bugging me. I think I need to talk to him. So what do? You check out the story. You tell him what happened, and you tell him how you were feeling about it or thinking about it, and then you ask him what did happen or what's their point of view, and then you listen. What do when you're angry or really, really perturbed? You watch for those strong negative feelings. You question your story. What's the question? Why would a decent person do this? What's the question? 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 Yes. What's the question? Good. Might be this, might be that. I'm not sure. Maybe I should talk to them. Listen. Talk it through. Well, boy, that's a hard concept. I just gave you a theory that most psychologists don't learn until they get their PhDs. This is a very advanced theory of human behavior. And you listened really well. You worked really hard to understand it. I've seen this little idea change relationships and lives. I challenge you to realize You are not your feelings. Your feelings are something different. When you feel strong negative feelings, that's not you. That's your feelings. And you can think about your feelings. You can say, what story am I telling myself that's causing me to feel this way? You can say, is that story accurate? Is there another story I can tell that's truer than the story I'm believing, that in fact would make me feel even better? Now, once you learn this skill, it gives you power over many of your emotions. And you could get so good at this skill, so good at correcting your stories, that I don't know if you and I could get this good, but I know someone who was so good at this that when they tortured him and nailed him to a cross, you know what he told himself? They don't know what they're doing. They don't realize what they're doing. And you know what he did to act? He said a prayer. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. He wasn't angry at them. He didn't feel hate in his heart. He felt pity and forgiveness for someone who was doing something very unkind. And if you could get that good at telling yourself correct stories, it could change you and everyone around you forever. And that's my testimony in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.